Okay, welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving into a story that perfectly blends high-level academia, incredibly rigid bureaucracy, and honestly a massive dose of sheer absurdity. If you've ever felt totally frustrated by a seemingly pointless rule, you are absolutely going to love the creative and just flat-out hilarious solution we're about to uncover. Let's get right into it.
So, to set the stage, the scholar we're looking at today published some seriously highly cited nuclear physics papers back in the mid-1970s and 80s. We're talking about incredibly dense, complex research into low-temperature physics and atomic exchange effects. You know, the kind of groundbreaking science that earned you immense respect in the academic world? But it really begs the question, who exactly was the brilliant mind behind this work?
Well, on paper, we are talking about a highly credentialed academic named F.D.C. Willard. This scholar achieved milestones most researchers literally only dream of. Co-authoring a massive paper on atomic exchange effects in helium-3? That's huge, and it was published in Physical Review Letters, which is hands down one of the most prestigious physics journals on the planet. Plus, his work didn't just gather dust, it was highly cited by other top-tier physicists. F.D.C. Willard was for sure a real heavy hitter in the world of science.
But here is the crucial point, and honestly, this is where the story gets absolutely hilarious. This esteemed, widely cited scholar was actually a house cat. Yep, specifically a Siamese cat named Chester. This is not a metaphor, it's not some clever acronym for a top-secret government project. We are talking about an actual, literal feline who probably spent most of his days napping in sunbeams and demanding extra treats. So how on earth does a pet end up co-authoring a prestigious physics paper?
Well, let's move into our first major section, a pre-computer pronoun problem, or as I like to call it, the tyranny of the typewriter.
The year was 1975. An American physicist and mathematician named Jack Hetherington, who was working out of Michigan State University at the time, had just finished writing up some really exciting research on low-temperature physics. He was super ready to submit it to Physical Review Letters. But, being a thorough academic, he handed his draft over to a colleague for one final read-through. And that colleague noticed a critical formatting error that essentially stopped the entire submission dead in its tracks. Hetherington's dilemma was just frustratingly simple. See, he had written the entire paper using the editorial we, like we found that or we deduce. The problem? The journal had this incredibly strict policy. They would outright reject any paper that used the plural we if there was only a single author listed. So for Hetherington to actually get his paper published, every single we in that document needed to become an I, or he needed to add a second author.
And you know, this perfectly illustrates the grueling era before computers. It's kind of hard for us to imagine today, right? In our modern editing reality, fixing something like this is literally a 5-second job. You just hit Control+F, type we, replace it with I, and boom, you're done. But in the 1975 editing reality, oh man, Hetherington was facing days of agonizing manual retyping on a typewriter. Make one single mistake and you have to start the whole page over. Fixing a minor pronoun rule meant a monumental, totally soul-crushing amount of busy work.
Rather than face the typewriter, Hetherington made a deeply relatable choice. Which brings us to our next chapter, Inventing F.D.C. Willard, the ultimate co-author.
Now, he obviously couldn't just use his cat's actual name, Chester, because his colleagues at Michigan State would probably recognize it right away. So, he ingeniously crafted this very distinguished-sounding pen name. He took the scientific name for a house cat, Felis domesticus, and abbreviated it to F.D.C. Then, he added his cat's given name Chester as a middle initial and finished it off by using the name of Chester's feline father, Willard, as the surname. And just like that, the esteemed physicist F.D.C. Willard was born. And get this, the ruse worked absolutely perfectly. Hetherington submitted the paper with F.D.C. Willard officially sharing the byline, solving that annoying plural pronoun problem instantly. By November 1975, the paper was officially accepted and published in Volume 35 of Physical Review Letters. The entire scientific community was reading and citing this groundbreaking physics research, completely, totally unaware that one of the authors was probably coughing up a hairball right at that very moment.
But, as we'll see in this next section, a secret this wonderfully absurd couldn't stay hidden forever. The co-author gets unmasked through paw prints and phone calls.
The subterfuge began to playfully unravel, and it was mostly because Hetherington himself just couldn't resist the joke. He actually started sending copies of the published article to his friends, and right alongside his own signature, he included F.D.C. Willard's signature, which was a literal ink-dipped paw print. It didn't take long before confused callers to Michigan State University actually began asking to speak with Willard by name, and whenever Hetherington was out of the office, visiting academics would demand to meet his mysterious, highly elusive co-author.
So, tracking his academic rise, it all started with that debut in 1975. The jig was officially up a few years later, in 1978, at the 15th International Conference on Low-Temperature Physics over in Grenoble, France. That's where Hetherington's co-author was finally, publicly exposed to the wider academic world. But here's the best part. Being unmasked didn't stop F.D.C. Willard's career. It actually cemented his status as a total academic legend.
I mean, the crucial point here is just how far the university actually embraced this joke. The cat wasn't just a funny piece of trivia. He was actually offered a professorship. Yes, Michigan State University Dean Truman O. Woodruff wrote an official letter floating the idea of offering Willard an appointment as a professor. Just imagine being a hard-working academic, putting in the hours, and then finding out a Siamese cat just got offered tenure before you did. No way. Let's move to our final act and see how this all played out. A solo career and legacy, the feline academic. As the Gold Biosource delightfully points out, Willard was allegedly a little bit peeved that his human colleague was publicly downplaying his contributions to their research. So, in typical standoffish feline fashion, Willard essentially decided he didn't need Hetherington holding him back anymore. It was clearly time to strike out on his own and prove his worth as a strong, independent scholar.
So in September of 1980, Willard seemingly ditched his human co-author entirely and actually published a sole-authored piece. It was an essay on solid helium-3, and it was published in the popular French science magazine La Recherche. That's right, the cat published a solo paper in French.
And this just brilliantly illustrates his academic growth, right? I mean, think about it. Back in 1975, he was just a co-author, using those tricky plural pronouns, writing in English. But by 1980, he's a sole author, which meant he finally got to use the correct singular pronouns, all while casually showing off his French. It's just a remarkable trajectory for a researcher who, let's be honest, also spent a good portion of his day chasing string.
Now, despite their little professional spat, Jack and Chester, or I should say Professor Hetherington and Dr. Willard, remained amicable roommates for 14 years until the cat sadly passed away in 1982. But Willard left behind such a delightful legacy. Academics just kept the joke alive. For years, F.D.C. Willard would just pop up in the footnotes of random physics papers, being thanked for his useful contributions to the discussion. And he's rightly earned his permanent place on lists of famous historical felines.
And the scientific community continues to honor him even today. The American Physical Society, the folks who published the very journal where Willard made his big debut, fully embraced the joke in 2014. For April Fool's Day, they announced they were breaking down their subscription paywalls specifically to make all feline-authored research totally open access. If you go to their site today, that famous 1975 Hetherington Willard paper is officially labeled free to read.
So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this somewhat provocative final thought. What rigid, completely bureaucratic rule would you creatively bypass if you were given the chance? Hetherington could have easily just spent a week retyping his paper, but instead he gave us one of the absolute greatest inside jokes in scientific history. It's a great reminder that sometimes a harmless, creative subversion of the rules doesn't just save you time, it can leave a wonderfully weird, lasting legacy. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember, keep questioning the rules.